We're the Hub Podcast.
Yeah, this is Will, aka AMBE, Josh, the Mexican metalhead, and
Arielle Caimana. What's that?
We've been having some very intense conversations recently.
Very thought-provoking conversations.
Special thanks to Lamar, who we got to talk to. He gave us a very interesting perspective, and to the people in the chat for asking questions.
Yeah.
Like, we appreciate everybody who's asking questions, even the ones that are not from the U.S. who are asking, who are giving their perspective on the whole thing. Because, that's something that we don't really think about, is how are other countries perceiving this, especially since 16 other countries have joined in on the protests.
And also the best way to address concerns is to find out what precisely is everyone's concerns, because it does vary between individuals.
And I mean, like, the way to essentially, one of the main ways to solve, everything when it comes to this whole, like, police brutality and everything that Black Lives Matter is just having an open dialogue in general with perspectives outside of your own. And now we're taking it to a grander scale, even outside of the U.S., but similar thing, too.
Mm-hmm. But we do have to kind of bring it back to where we started, which is the protests. Because the protests, the biggest thing going on right now is there's a lot of opposition to these protests because they are being categorized with rioters and looters, and therefore the police are well within their rights to try to, barricade shops to try to stop riot. That's why they're in riot gear, because they're anticipating riots.
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't seem to be the case across pretty much almost every instance that's been documented about these riots and these lootings that happen, is that they are either a show of force by people who are not at all associated with the movement, by people who are grossly misinterpreting the Black Lives Matter movement, or by non-Black individuals who are destroying the property and creating a counter-effective measure that the movement has never really intended to produce.
Which gives a lot of the people that are looking at that from the other perspective and only focusing on that of the looting and saying that, trying to make it seem like everything having to do with the protest is suddenly delegitimized because of the people that are doing looting.
So you have the head of the ACLU and the Black Lives Matter movements going out on multiple platforms and legit saying, this is not what we stand for. We do not do this. And I'll go back to what I said before when I went to the protest to document what was going on the first time a few days ago. That's what the sentiment was people saying the people in the Black Lives Matter movement saying, we do not incite anything. Anyone who is inciting violence is not speaking for this movement. This movement is literally to end violence, specifically violence from police against the Black community. So that's where it goes back to. Now, they're allegedly in San Diego. I was not there, but down in the courthouse the day before I went to the protest, SWAT was dispatched. Yeah. And rubber bullets and gas was fired into a protest that by all means was very peaceful, not blocking traffic and going about its peaceful protest with people who are exercising their First Amendment rights. Right. Just like people who were exercising their First Amendment rights the month before with AR-15s and semi-automatic rifles.
Yeah.
Now these people who have no weapons, these people who have signs and were on their knees with their hands up saying, hands up, don't shoot, and Black Lives Matter, your chants that you say, the chants that were most prominent were, what's his name, George Floyd, what's her name, Breonna Taylor, Black Lives Matter, and then you have hands up, don't shoot, no justice, no peace. So
and I can't breathe.
Yes, and I can't breathe. And all of these are very, these are not insightful words. These are words that, they were the last words of George Floyd, who was killed. Breonna Taylor, who was killed by police when they broke into her home and shot her in her sleep, only to find out that they were in the wrong home. The suspect they were looking for was already in jail. And then they arrested her husband for firing back at the home intruders.
You mean exercising his Second Amendment rights and protecting his home from, I'm not even sure if they disclosed who they were when they entered the home. Did they?
No.
Yeah,
because SWAT doesn't have to do that.
Exactly. So I'm just, spelling this whole little thing of, what is it called? Double standards?
Because police have to announce themselves. In most cases, they don't.
Yeah.
But SWAT doesn't need to. SWAT
And
can break down your door.
and there is also a history of them getting the wrong house.
Oh, there's an extreme history.
Yeah.
There's so much history against the intentions of SWAT that there's been an Adam Ruins Everything episode that came out last year. So foreshadowing.
Oh yeah.
So we're actually going to speak with one of the protesters who was in the crowd peacefully protesting, and she claims that she was fired upon by the police when she was on her knees with her hands up.
So for those in the audience, this means this is a first person account.
Sorry about that.
It is not like, you're not seeing the news, you're not seeing, people, editing or doing whatever. This is somebody talking about their personal experience. I do believe her experience was shared by many that were with her.
Mm-hmm. She wasn't the only person in the crowd. No.
Yeah, I do believe, being able to have this kind of conversation with somebody who was actually there is very powerful and very useful to have, because, we're sitting at home. We don't know what it's like to be there. We don't know the kind of fear that may have came up or the kind of tactics.
And if we want a truly unbiased story, we do have to speak to both sides. But regardless, the police are not responding to any form of comment.
Yeah,
of course not. Like, they're not commenting. When they do things like turning off body cam, that doesn't tell me that they want to tell their side of the story, at least the truthful one, So I'd rather hear whatever is down there.
I'm personally for the New York City has a measure called as part of the Freedom of Information Act where the police cannot at any time cover their badge. And if you have an interaction with the police, you legally are allowed, and they are legally supposed to give you their name, their badge number, and their precinct, and everything like that. That's why it was so controversial not too long ago when NYPD commissioner sent out a tweet with the picture of the badge with the black band over the badge,
right over the number. Yeah.
So, and to go back to San Diego, we don't have that law. So the police in the protest, at least the second day, who were in full riot gear, the riot gear was covering their badge, and it was covering their name tag. So you don't know who it was. You probably wouldn't be able to identify them properly.
So there's no way of holding anybody accountable.
Unless you can recognize them from their face, under their face shields, and in which case you'd have to pick them out of a lineup. Where would you find that lineup? In a police station.
Yeah. Which, again, remember, this is something that police officers and the government has said, if you got nothing to hide,
Like the truth is supposed to set you free.
Yeah. So, please, if you're an officer, we understand supposedly the reasoning behind it is to stand in solidarity. But right now, it's time for you to stand
in solidarity with the community that you serve.
Yeah.
To serve and protect. And you're not protecting us if you are hiding.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, how does blocking a badge number be translated to "I'm in solidarity with you"?
Solidarity to the officers who are going away, who are getting in trouble, and that's the part that is bad. That you're standing with the wrong people.
Right.
And it's been proven time and time again that cops can get away with it. So if you can get away with all of these issues and all of these settlements, why do you have to cover your name? Why do you have to cover your badge?
This guy didn't cover his name though. He just covered the badge.
Well,
we just know the last name. How many of them are there?
That's fair. I mean, it seems like a distinct last name.
Yeah.
Hey, let me tell you this though. This is enough information though for Twitter to go after this guy. Essentially though, they got a really good thing in the face and the last name. Probably find him in a few seconds.
But yeah, let's get your source on the line.
We're gonna be calling Devan. Hey, Devan.
Hi.
Hi, it's Kai. You're on air right now.
Hi.
Hey, we were just talking, going over again about the protest, specifically when I went on the second day. I didn't have any personal experience with anybody firing into the crowd on the police side, but their badges were covered and their names were covered. And I was wondering, when you went to the protest on the day that you did, were you able to identify the police at all, or were they already in full riot gear?
There were cops just in uniforms, and I could see their badge numbers and their names. And then there was a team that showed up in full riot gear, and those officers you couldn't identify in any way.
Oh, Wow. So it's like almost separate like group of like the people essentially for like, trying to do the
There
riot
was
control.
there was about, I want to say probably about 50 officers that showed up in riot gear, about 25 units, like cars,
Wow.
that came barreling through.
So they showed up mid-protest.
We were in front of the Hall of Justice, and people were speaking. You know, we took moments of silence. You know, we were obviously chanting like most of the protesters, and then the cops in riot gear showed up, and they essentially surrounded us. They stood shoulder to shoulder with one another, and they had us surrounded on all sides. So really, there was nowhere for us to disperse to if we even wanted to at that time.
See, I didn't know that part. I thought that they just showed up.
They showed up and they just stood there. Like, they didn't really say anything. They weren't giving any kind of direction. Protesters, you know, started chanting, "Take a knee." You know, some were getting, I don't want to use the term aggressive, but some protesters started to get really angry at that point because, you know, we were very peaceful, and why are you showing up in full riot gear? And then some girl, this white girl said, you know, all white people to the front. And so everybody that was white kind of stepped forward and stood between people of color and the police in riot gear.
Wow.
And, you know, they began chanting, "Take a knee." And then I think it was like that for like 2 minutes. And then the police started closing in on us. Like, they just started walking towards us. They weren't really giving any kind of direction. And then as they approached the line of people, they just started shoving people, like, to the ground, shoving them back. They had their batons out. It more so looked like a little mini wooden bat.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, one of those flash grenades goes off. And, I mean, that in itself scared a lot of people because it's super loud. It sounds like an explosion. And then right after that, they started just throwing tear gas into the crowd, and everyone's trying to run in all these different ways. But, like, because they surrounded us, there was nowhere really for us to go. So we started running, like, across from the Hall of Justice. There's like this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like a little mini park that's in between, like, people can sit. People started running that way, and we're like jumping over fences, over trash cans. They kept throwing tear gas, and then they started just shooting into the crowd. Like, you just heard rapid fire, almost like what you hear in military movies. Like, it was just constant, just blah, 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 blah.
Oh my God.
And, you know, like, you saw people on the ground, couldn't breathe. Everybody started taking their masks off because that tear gas is so, I mean, it burns. It burns every part of your respiratory system, your lungs, your nose, your mouth, and your eyes start to water and you can't see.
And
then,
do you know what provoked that, or it's just you heard a bang?
Literally nothing. Literally nothing. They weren't giving any direction. They weren't asking us to disperse. You know, they weren't saying, you know, you can't collect here. Nothing. They just did it.
You know where it came from? Because if they were surrounding you and you were facing the Hall of Justice, did it come from behind or from the side?
No, it came from the officers. Like, if you're facing the Hall of Justice, it came from the officers on the right side.
Okay.
And then once they started, then the officers on the left side started.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So that's essentially what kettling is.
Yeah.
That's when they, so to describe what kettling is, it's literally when they corral a group of protesters together to just attack them in a sense. It's kind of like that end scene of Game of Thrones, for lack of better description.
I mean, and then after that, then people got mad and people started throwing things at cops. That's when I saw water bottles actually being thrown at cops.
Okay,
because
so
from
it
the
wasn't
news account that I heard afterwards.
Yeah, see, I heard some testimony obviously from the police side saying that water bottles were thrown and then flashbangs went off. But you're saying the flashbang went off and then water bottles were thrown?
And then after the tear gas, people started throwing stuff. Like, we all kind of ran away. And then when the police stopped, like, using the flash grenades and the tear gas, everybody, slowly started coming back. But at that point, like, tensions were so hot and heavy that people started throwing stuff at the cops and yelling at the cops. And they just, the cops still stood there. They didn't really attack. I did see a couple people get arrested. But then they did the same thing, like, everybody collected back, because, people's attitudes at this point are, we know what you're doing. You do it all the time. We're sick of it. We're not going to run away this time. So everyone came back. And we did the same thing, only this time we were all down on one knee, fist in the air, chanting. And then we switched it to just our hands in the air. Everybody was chanting, hands up, don't shoot. And at that point, the officers did the same thing, and they just started lashing at people.
Yeah.
So
And
this was a case of multiple times that they shot into an unprovoking crowd.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The time where we were on our knees, I was actually next to a girl, and at this point, the news crews were there, because I'd been told by multiple people that I was on the news at this point. And the officer standing in front of us just came in, like, charged at me and this other girl, and actually knocked her on the ground. And
wow.
Then a whole bunch of people saw that, so everybody started getting mad, kind of coming at this particular officer. And then a white guy actually jumped in between this girl and the officer, because she was on the ground and he was still going at her. Wow. And this guy, like, the officer punched this guy in the face. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Officer punched this guy, ended up ripping his shirt clean off of his body.
Whoa.
And, like, me and several other people were trying to get the girl off the ground. She's just in tears, kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Because they're fighting over her. And then we finally got her up. And this particular officer started yelling, like, give me your ID, give me your ID, you're under arrest. And the guy's like, under arrest for what? You assaulted somebody, and then you assaulted me. He's like, I didn't do anything. The most I did was push you off of an innocent person that you assaulted. And then, the cops kept screaming in his face, like, you're under arrest, I'm placing you under arrest. And then other officers kind of pulled him back, like, no, you can't do that. And then they lined back up.
How many times would you say the police came at the group of protesters violently? Because I counted two. So the first time they came at you with the flashbangs and the tear gas, and then you rekindled, you're on your knees, hands in the air, saying hands up, don't shoot, and then they assaulted again. Did this happen a third or fourth time, or was just kind of continuous? Oh my goodness. Okay.
So it happened a third time. So at that point, after he attacked that girl, they started telling us that we needed to move back. Like, they were trying to disperse us from that area. And at that point, the officers on either side, they kind of ended up splitting the crowd. So half the crowd went towards Harbor Drive. The other half started making their way back up Market, because they're just kind of shoving us back. And, they're still, everyone's still protesting, still chanting. And then, they did, for a third time, they started throwing those flash grenades, tear gas. And at this point, I think it had been about 40 minutes maybe since they first showed up, and they started, throwing the tear gas, rapid firing into the crowd again. And at that point, I just ran, because somebody next to me got hit with one of the rubber bullets. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe.
So they were firing rubber bullets into the San Diego crowd.
Peaceful protesters.
Because I'd heard of rubber bullets being used everywhere but San Diego. So this is the first time I'm hearing of rubber bullets being used in San Diego. Do you know if they were firing to the ground and then it was bouncing up into protesters, or they were just firing straight into the crowd?
I don't know necessarily like every officer, but there were a few officers that I did see that were just firing directly.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And then even when they were lined up, not really doing anything, they all had their fingers on that trigger.
So you're saying they showed up prepared to riot?
They did.
They did.
And then, once everybody started lashing out because they're pissed, and more specifically, white people were the ones to first really lash out towards the police. For obvious reasons, like they're mad, but also, most black people, like, we're not going to even go there because we're going to be the next name on that long list of names. But
do you think that was a smart move by the white protesters? Because I'm also under the impression that if a white protester were to instigate any sort of animosity with a police officer, that their black counterpart protesters would be getting more of a they would be getting a worse brunt than them.
Yeah, they would use it as an excuse to go after them.
General population will look at it more as like them starting it.
Absolutely is the case. Absolutely. I definitely saw them going after white people too, but when white people lash out at the police violently, even if they've done something violent towards the protesters, it literally gives them an excuse to go after people of color, which is exactly what they did. They started punching and hitting black people around the white people with batons.
So you saw firsthand that it was targeted. Was it still targeted towards people of color, even though white people were instigating it?
Yes. I watched on multiple occasions officers just go up and push a black person. As we were walking away from where they were telling us to get away from, as they were trying to move the crowd, I literally watched this cop come up behind this girl. She was about 5'3", black girl, and just shove her to the ground.
Jeez.
For no reason. Just shoved her to the ground.
From the back, so she was retreating then.
Mm-hmm. She didn't even see it coming.
God, because I've been seeing so many of those videos happen too, where it's like people are at that point, they're already retreating, and the cops are still just trying to go very aggressive at them.
And I also have to set the scene. When I showed up on day 2 of protest, this was also a youth-led protest, so there is incentive to not hurt youth, obviously. But the line of police that, the protests were met with, at the very front were the Mexican and black cops. And then behind them were the white cops.
Oh, really?
I don't quite think that was coincidence.
Oh, no, that sounds strategic at that point.
Yeah, that sounds very strategic.
Because it'd be for the photos.
Yep.
There definitely were white cops in the front. We can look back at the pictures and show it, but I do know that I came face to face with more black and brown officers in the front of the line than I did in the back.
Interesting.
Doesn't surprise me.
Did you see that at all when you showed up, or do you think that only happened on day 2 on?
The bulk of what I saw were white officers, but at the same time, they were in full riot gear. So the bulk of them had their faces covered with a shield.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that I could not see on those particular officers.
What was how do you go home after that? What's your takeaway when that, because that just to me sounds like an incredibly unsafe situation.
It was terrifying. After the third round of the flashbangs and the tear gas, like I said, I ran away. I literally ran from 2nd and Broadway to 4th and Market. And at that point, I borrowed somebody's phone because my phone died because I was recording everything. And I borrowed someone's phone and called my dad to come get me. And, there's a lot I don't remember because that adrenaline was just pumping so hard. But I remember my hands were shaking. I couldn't really articulate what I wanted to articulate. And then I got home and, in trying to decompress, I took a shower because I was covered in that tear gas, and my body actually broke out in hives. My shoulders and my arms were covered in a million little tiny blisters that lasted for about 2 days, just from that stress alone.
Dang.
And that's not something that you really learn about tear gas.
Nobody talks about that at all. Like you said,
the effects and everything.
So, speaking on the effects of tear gas, we mentioned earlier that the use of tear gas is illegal in other countries, but for use by the military. The military can't go to another country, even in war, and use tear gas. as they please. But it's been used domestically. So having had tear gas on you, you said it goes all through your lungs. I know that gas masks aren't, they're not going to stop tear gas. It's still going to go through. It's still going to burn your eyes, and you're going to cry or drool, and you get all, like, the disgusting slobber from your face. But you said it was all over your body.
Yeah, like it was like a powdery residue that was left, like, on my clothes.
Yeah.
So it's like a layer of tear gas left on your body.
Yeah.
So it lingers. It's not even like you breathe it and you're gone. Like it'll stay.
Yeah. The only thing that I can say is the tear gas. So milk in your eyes and then water with baking soda also helps to get it out of your eyes. But if it got thrown right where you were standing and you get like that fresh coat of it, it's literally, it's in your pores, it's in your hair. You know, even if you're able to rinse your eyes out so that you can see, the second you start sweating, that gas is going right back in your eyes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, dang. You need to think about that too. Yeah, it's like it's already in your pores, so it's like it's just gonna keep coming back constantly.
This is an actual weapon.
Which is why it makes sense
absolutely.
to ban this kind of thing. You know, at like but it's like, hey, let's use it on our own U.S. citizens because clearly that's the way to do it.
And we spoke on this a little bit later, Devin, but you said your dad didn't want you going back out into protest, huh?
He doesn't. He begs me almost every day, you know, just to kind of stay away. But
how does that feel that, you know, you want to protest for something that means a lot to you, for something that means a lot to just humanity in general, and it's unsafe for you to peacefully protest?
You know,
honestly,
exercising
for
your
me,
first. Sorry, go ahead.
For me, it makes me angry, like knowing that fear lies that, you know, okay, if I go back out and I'm standing for this cause that I believe in, there's a really good chance that I could either end up seriously injured, in jail, you know, or, I mean, they're shooting people in the face in places with beanbags and rubber bullets. You know, people are literally losing eyes because of this, you know, and knowing that for me personally, it makes me angry and it makes me want to go that much more. But like for my dad, you know, who he's lived through this. You know, he grew up in Compton and then he moved to the Midwest, you know, where I was born, and I personally watched him on multiple occasions get messed with by police. You know, he's getting pulled out of his vehicle. I watched a cop call him the N-word and pull him out of his car and hold a gun to his head before they realized that me and my little brother were in the back seat. You know, and I fully believe my dad would have been murdered in that instant had they not noticed children in the car. You know, so, you know, and he's lived through this. This is something that he's been dealing with his whole entire life, you know, and which makes me even more passionate about it. And I want so badly to be able to walk with him in these protests because I know how meaningful it is for him to see this global outrage of how Black people are treated in this world. But, you know, he said to me the day that I went that he didn't want to go because he was scared of putting himself in a situation where he would have to run for his life and he wouldn't be able to. You know, and that in itself broke my heart.
Yeah, because who do you call when the police are terrorizing you?
Literally. And, you know, and like, especially for, I mean, people of his age period, you know, all of these people of color that grew up in the 50s and the 60s, you know, they lived through these race riots. And to be doing it again, you know, especially now with more support, but they're still scared of the people that are supposed to protect you.
It's like, why are we having to still continue to go through this? Which is why the protests are happening in the first place right now. I saw like this really heartbreaking video too, like these group, you know, it's like one guy who's lived through that, you know, time with like the LA riots and like a younger kid and like a guy. It's like these generations of people are so tired of having to deal with this constantly. And so, I mean, I totally can understand where your dad's coming from in that sense. It's got to be really hard.
Yeah,
when
and
it
I
comes
mean,
to
we
think
can
about
always
that.
sympathize, but we could never empathize.
Of course.
And it kind of goes back to another conversation we were having before, where someone once told me that if you ask any black person their cop story, they're always going to have one. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's a very extreme cop story.
It's
And
one that you experienced seeing as just like a kid happening to your dad.
yeah, and that happened very young.
Just having that ingrained
Yeah.
in you as a kid is something that should never have happened in the first place.
Because the idea is that there's not supposed to be a distrust in the police, but there is a resounding distrust because of police brutality. And then when you try to, go to a peaceful protest to exercise your First Amendment rights, you literally have weapons of mass destruction turned on you. So yeah, I can see where that's literally terrifying to protesters, to the not even just to protesters, just to black people who are trying to have a place in this world where they're not being brutalized, and they're being brutalized without being provoked. I'm not sure what to say to that. I can just comment on it. I didn't realize that the first day of protest got that bad, because I was up in East Village and I didn't even hear it.
Yeah, they didn't really talk about it, because I was watching the news, local news afterwards, and the reporters got there after I did. Like the bulk of the reporters went after I had already left. And from their reporting, they were all saying that the protesters provoked the violence that ensued. That, protesters were throwing rocks and water bottles.
Did they interview any protesters? Did they interview any protesters?
When I was watching it, no. That first day, they didn't ask any one of the protesters any questions. They were just going off of police accounts.
Because I know when I watched KUSI, they weren't interviewing protesters. So if there were more independent San Diego news stations, we're talking CBS 8, we're talking Fox 5, we're talking Sinclair. And if none of them interviewed protesters, then of course they're all going to say that it was instigated by protesters.
Exactly.
But it's also easy to say that when the protesters aren't there because they've been chased off with tear gas and rubber bullets.
Yeah, and just for clarification, that means that the news outlets did not show up until after minimum of 3 to 4 rounds of tear gas that built up adrenaline in the crowd and people getting angry and then defending themselves.
A crowd, like a crowd that physically could not escape.
That started trying to defend themselves from a tyrannical military force being used against them. I just want to clarify that that is what you're saying happened here.
Yeah. Well, the first news station got there after at least the first round of the flash grenades and the tear gas, because I was told by my dad and a couple of his friends actually that they saw me on the news on the ground with my hands up, and then saw an officer coming towards me.
Oh, really?
And then they said that the camera cut out at that point, that they didn't get to see what happened after that. But they saw me on the ground with my hands up next to other people doing the same thing, and officers charging towards us.
Is there anyone that you know of in the crowd of protesters that were armed with anything other than water bottles?
No. Everybody was literally screaming, "I'm unarmed. I don't have anything on me." Everyone, hands up. Everyone's, basically, they're all saying the same thing. We're unarmed. We're here peacefully. The only thing that they were asking of the police was take a knee. Plain and simple. And I know that their orders, they probably can't do something like that, but that's all anybody was asking.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, if it was on orders, who gave the order and who made that okay? And also, where, Devan, where, I know I asked you this in a sense before, but where did you feel like you could go after all of that happened, after doing nothing wrong and still being treated like a criminal?
Literally nowhere. I ran as far away from the gas as I could get, and then I called somebody to come get me. Because, at that point, I didn't feel safe being downtown at all. Mm-hmm. And, as I said, I ran to 4th and Market, which is where I waited for my dad to come get me. And even standing there waiting, I saw a second protest coming down Market. And, they didn't have any police with them yet, but there was a large group of people moving down Market, and they ended up taking a right down, I think, First to go towards Broadway. And I told everybody that I saw that could hear me, I told all of them, I'm like, hey, the cops have everybody surrounded over there, and they are shooting at the crowd. They're throwing tear gas. They're throwing flash grenades, and you could still hear those grenades going off.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people that kind of stopped and turned around, and then there were people that just kept going. But the second I saw that second crowd, I wanted to be anywhere but there, just out of fear for what they were going to do.
Wow.
Were you able to capture any evidence during this? Because I know you say your phone had died by that point.
So the video, I was on Facebook Live, and on that, you see all of the cops show up, dressed in full riot gear. You see them line up, and then they start marching and chanting as they're marching. And then, you can see the crowd, I'm in the crowd. You see the officers line up and everybody chanting, and then you hear a flash grenade go off. And you can see that I'm running, but then my phone died right then. So I didn't get, unfortunately, anything else.
But your hands were up died. And you hear it. That literally corroborates your story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know
what
to
say.
say.
A lot of people with that one.
I'm so sorry that had to happen to you. This is really bad.
Honestly, it sucks that was the experience that I had, but at the same time, I'm so grateful that was the experience that I had. I grew up seeing police brutality, especially towards my father. I've seen it, towards my brother, even in San Diego. But to be able to say that I had that experience, it's not something that I'm ashamed of. Looking back down the road, I have kids, I have grandkids, and they're asking about this time. And, that's something that I get to share. I'm before the police reform, yes, I experienced it. I was there, I was in the protest, and I personally witnessed police lashing out at peaceful people for literally no reason, and people of all color. It wasn't just black people there. They were lashing out at white people too.
But it also kind of proves your point that you're not crazy, that police brutality has been happening, that the stories that you're telling us of what you saw happen with your father, happen with your brother, happen with yourself, that for all I know, it's not, that's not crazy. Because if that happened in a situation where there's been no cameras, and this happened in a situation where there were many cameras, and they still decided to throw at least 3 sets of flashbangs and tear gas into a crowd of protesters after kettling them in and making sure that they can't escape, that's riot. That's riot inciting. That has nothing to do with the protest.
Exactly.
And they did incite a mini riot. I'm sure they got it under control because I didn't hear anything about it. But after that third round of it, as I was running away, I was watching people busting the windows of cop cars out, slashing their tires, breaking the mirrors off. I watched them do it, which was even more reason for me to run away. Because I'm not going to jail for that because I would absolutely been arrested for that one.
Yeah, the person we spoke to before you, Lamar, he said that, that he learned not to lash out at human beings, but to take it out on objects, their anger, their frustrations, and in moments like these, is when your body is activated in fight or flight, and these people wanted to fight, but they chose not to attack the officers and just to hurt materials that can be easily replaced, that has insurance. And yet, so to me, that shows that even more restraint on the behalf of the protesters than the police officers who were
the
there.
strength of the protesters is clearly shown right there.
Because
if you look at it that way,
regardless,
honestly.
the protesters did have the numbers. Even if you put all of the downtown San Diego PD together, protesters had the numbers every single time. But the police had the gear, they had the weapons, and they had
the training.
Well, yeah,
too.
and they had 6 months of training. That's all it takes for the academy is the 6 months. But the entire time, the 6 months, if you're being taught these riot techniques, you're gonna be expecting riots from peaceful protesters.
Right. Especially if they have
They
weapons that
came
are
in ready
illegal.
for it.
Okay.
Now, I don't know necessarily, because from what I saw, the bulk of the people that were destroying, the police cars, they were white. And it's like, I'm not bashing white people at this moment, but
the fact of the
coming
observation
from
is
somebody-
that you didn't see a whole lot of black and brown people doing that. Huh?
well, coming from someone of color, like, we learn at a very young age, we can't do everything that white kids do. It's just, it's an unfortunate fact that we just learn, And I remember my dad telling me when I was very young, it's like, if you're with your friends, you're with all your white friends, and they decide that they want to break something or they want to do something that isn't right, you have to walk away, because you're not going to get the same punishment that they're going to get. Whatever you get is worse. So in these protests, I'm sure you'll see all over the internet, all over the news, that the bulk of the time that people are destroying stuff, people of color are stepping forward and telling them not to.
Yeah.
Because
that's been
just
my
like the media did, every time something happened, it was, oh, well, see, black people, they destroy shit. That's not how you're going to get your message across.
Yeah.
So when I was there, no, it was not black people breaking, windows out of cop cars. It was white people, because they just didn't grow up learning that, lashing out is only going to have a negative consequence.
How young were you, would you say, when your dad first told you that you do not have the same privileges as your white friends?
I think the first time he really had that conversation with me, I was in kindergarten.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, and then, for the people out there that were doing it, they were doing it because they've had the privilege of not having to be fearful of retaliation from the police department.
Yeah, it's the idea that the law and order is kind of this all-seeing type thing.
We didn't necessarily grow up being told, like, the police are bad, they're not going to help you. That's not really what gets instilled. It's more, if you ever find yourself in a situation with the police, or, you ever have to go to ask them for help, make sure your hands aren't in your pockets. Make sure your hands are always where they can see you. Don't make any sudden movements. If you get pulled over, make sure your hands are on the steering wheel at all times, and then when they ask you for stuff, articulate to them what you're doing. Like, okay, officer, I'm going to reach in my glove box to get my registration. Like, that's more what's instilled in us. Like, we're not taught to fear them. We're taught to just tread lightly with them.
To comply.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is
and
telling.
Then, I remember my dad telling my brother, even if you're angry, don't get angry. Don't let them know you're angry. Don't ever run away. Don't ever give them a reason to fear you, essentially, is what we're taught.
And would you say that conversation with your dad happened before or after your first cop incident that you witnessed?
Before.
Before.
And I'm pretty sure that, the time that he told me I, got in trouble at school for, I don't even remember what, something. A white kid called me Blackie, and I responded calling them Whitey, and I got in trouble. I got sent to the principal's office.
Wow.
That's not even offensive.
It's not, but in Missouri, it's a little bit offensive.
Okay.
And that was when he first had that conversation with me, and then he spoke to both my brother and I about it more after the time that we saw him get pulled out of the car, which, by the way, he got pulled over because he didn't have a license plate on the front part of his car. It was literally the reasoning that they gave.
So dumb.
But they needed to pull him out with a gun to his head.
And then
in the same
and then
exchange, they used
ultimately
the N-word?
arrested him. And then they
Oh my
ultimately
goodness.
arrested him. Like, my mom had to come pick up my brother and I from the police station.
How long did he spend
Jeez.
in jail for a missing license plate?
So he was driving us to school. So they put him in jail probably around 8 o'clock in the morning, and then when I got home from school, I think I got home at like 4 or 5ish. He was home. So I have no idea how long he was in jail. I mean, he's never really spoken to me much about it because at that time I was really too young to understand.
Yeah.
But I've never really revisited with him as an adult, so I don't know if they released him. I don't know if he had to bail out. You know, I have no idea how long he even sat in there. But I
And
do know that
wow.
they accused him of assaulting an officer.
I mean, like, just as a listener, I hear that, and I don't want that for you. But I also don't want your dad to have felt like he needed to comply to,
But
like,
he did.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'll never forget it. He was very calm. He did not
Mhm.
argue with them. He did everything they asked. I remember that he kept his hands up. He kept telling them, you know, like, I don't have anything to harm you. I'm just taking my kids to school, you know, and they didn't really hear it. And it wasn't until their guns were drawn. And my dad said, and I'll never forget it, like burned into my brain. He said, please don't kill me in front of my children. And that's when they noticed my brother and I in the backseat.
and you can't take that experience away. You can't take that away.
That is forever instilled.
And it just seems so unnecessary.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm speechless. I'm gonna gather my words. You guys can say. When it comes to why you're at the protest, that's obviously a very small portion because you have that experience as a young child. That is not anywhere near counting your lived experience for the rest of your life. But then to hear that you want to make a change, that you want to make a change by following the law, and it's still weaponized against you. That frustrates me because I don't know how I'm not supposed to have an opinion on that.
Right.
Honestly, like, that part doesn't even bother me because I'm so accustomed to it at this point. You know, I mean, there have been times that there was a time that I actually called the police, you know, for help, and I ended up in jail.
What?
Like, it's just,
Wait, what?
Really?
yeah. I was married to this man. He was in the military. He was in the Air Force, a white guy. And he had become increasingly, I don't want to say, not physically abusive, but verbally abusive. And he was an alcoholic. He just drank all the time. And there was one night he came home. He was belligerent. He was calling me all kinds of names, just like trying to start a fight. And I maintained my cool, you know, kind of just let him do what he was going to do, just ignored it. And then he took the car keys and he was planning on driving. So I followed him out of the house to try to stop him. And in the shuffle, my dog ran out. You know, he was super stoked. He thought he was just going to go on a car ride. And then the guy, like, he kicked my dog when my dog was trying to get in the car.
Wow.
He kicked him really hard. And then, you know, I was trying to fight with him to get the keys because I was like, you can't drive. Like, you're not going to drive right now. And I got the keys, got my dog, walked away from him. He ran up behind me and actually wrapped his hands around my neck like he was trying to choke me out. And in that moment, I was pissed. So I turned around and I just, like, I decked him. And I kind of unleashed all of my anger. And yeah. And at that moment, I unleashed all of my anger, and I kept going. You know, like, I could have just done a one punch and walked away from it, but I kept going. And then when I finally stopped, I went inside and I called the police. You know, because I was like, this situation is dangerous. I don't know what to do. I called the police. They showed up, separated us. You know, asked me what happened, took my statement, asked him what happened, took his statement. And then after they took his statement, they came in, told me that I was under arrest, and took me to jail and charged me for felony domestic violence. And they let him go home, go to bed.
Oh, so he didn't even get arrested either. They literally just took
No,
his side.
no. He got nothing. They asked him if he wanted to go to the hospital.
God damn.
So, I mean,
I'm not trying to leave you on the line here. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts enough to form a sentence.
It's fine. You know,
but
like I said, it's just that's everyday life for somebody, like for a person of color. It's nothing like, yeah, you know, we're angry and we're tired of being pushed and murdered for no reason by police.
At the same time, these aren't individual experiences. It's like every time some like you or anyone else tells us of an instance, it's like, oh yeah, and there's that other time. And I want to actually go back to something you said where you're like, you said that you're so accustomed to it because you know my boyfriend, he's also black. I think I also mentioned to you too when we were speaking when we were working together that's exactly what he said when my family had an adverse reaction to him being black. He's like, oh, I'm used to it. I'm from Alabama. But that's the problem is that if you get so accustomed to it that it becomes an everyday life, then it becomes possible for the police to continuously use brutality as a form of control. So it kind of ties back to, I see where these protests are necessary. I see where defunding the enormous amount of money that's spent on police and lawsuits and settlements is necessary. But the beatings, the prejudice, the continuous stories that I hear from people that I know personally, that they can't call the police on someone who's abusing them in their own home. I don't know what to say. I have nothing really to say to that. I thank you for opening up to that. That's incredibly important, especially to the conversation. But wow.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, that's a big part of why, you know, I want to be involved in the protest. You know, for me, you know, it's a way of life with police, but for future generations, like especially if I have kids, I don't want that to be their way of life. You know, I don't want to have kids that their immediate response to a police officer pulling them over is put my hands on the steering wheel, don't make any sudden movements because they might shoot me. You know, I don't want that. I don't want to see that continue. And now, you know, the whole world, it finally sees, you know, what Black people have been trying to tell them for decades. You know, we've been trying to get people to understand that racism is a real thing, especially when it comes to the justice system. You know, and it's just kind of been brushed under the rug for decades. And, you know, there have been people...
it kind of comes with the idea that because, in essence, white people do not have a generalized issue with police. They don't have individualized stories where they're harassed by police, that they don't understand how privilege plays into their relationship with the police and how that privilege benefits them in a way that people of color are not afforded.
Exactly.
So at this point, my impression is that the only thing that these protests are asking is that they are seen as equal under the eyes of the law, that the police are literally supposed to serve and protect. And you can't serve and protect communities when you're abusing literally half of them.
That they also matter.
Yeah. So if all lives matter, why aren't Black people treated equally?
Yeah. Well, it's like, that's why there's like that huge disconnect with the people that instantly want to respond to Black Lives Matter with this dumb hashtag saying it's all lives matter. It's because they have no idea what that lived experience is like at all. You know, a lot of us don't.
That, and it's like, all lives matter. It's so incredibly ignorant. Like, that's like saying, I mean, I posted a thing on Facebook that could best describe it for me. It was a picture of, it was either Jesus or a shepherd, I don't even know. And behind him there were about 50 sheep, and in front of him was a cliff and one sheep that was hanging off the cliff. And I posted that, and I was like, maybe this can help you understand. Like, yes, all lives do matter. We're not saying that they don't. But right now, with Black Lives Matter, it's targeted. Like, right now, we need help to get everybody to understand that Black people, their lives matter too. It's, yes, everybody matters. Yes, everyone should be taken care of. But right now, we're asking that the focus be taken off the 99% and focused on the 1%.
Exactly.
Like, we need everybody to just focus on this right now so that, yes, all lives eventually can matter.
Yeah, that picture with like the lambs and everything. I'm pretty sure because that is based off of
Yeah,
like
it's a Bible story of
Jesus
a shepherd
leaving the sheep to go grab the one that's been missing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It characterizes that a lot. I saw this other post of this person too. It's similar to All Lives Matter thing. They also were sharing this thing of like the Blue Lives Matter, trying to like share about the cops and everything. And I hate the whole thing too. But basically, someone commented under it, and they were just like, I could tell they probably already had this like planned in mind. They were just like, what about jobs like teachers? What about jobs like construction workers? They're important too. And the guy who shared the post originally was just like, those are important jobs too, but they're not the ones that are currently being, quote unquote, attacked at right now. Yeah, exactly. He literally just unintentionally explained the reason why there's like that, difference of actually saying Black Lives Matter as opposed to All Lives Matter. Just like I looked at that for a while, I'm like, come on, how do you not see it?
And it is frustrating because you, like, Devan, you are obviously not the first person to tell us stuff like this. And it's heartbreaking and it's frustrating that it happens literally so often. So how else are you supposed to explain why Black Lives Matter is such an integral and so intentional? Like, how is it so hard to see that every single person of color you talk to has that issue with police that is based off of lived experience and not off of, like, just obviously, like, just because your dad taught you how to interact with police doesn't mean you started off wary of police. You became wary of police when you saw how they acted towards your father. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I feel. I'm kind of out of words. Because I can't put my opinion, I can't put my spin on her experience.
Oh, of course.
Because I didn't live it.
Yeah. And I don't think we should. I think right now I feel like that's the problem that a lot of people that are not of color keep doing, is they keep trying to relate to it when they obviously can't.
Right.
And like, I think that's the part that a lot of people are having trouble, is empathizing and sympathizing with an experience that they never had. And that's why they're so focused on the All Lives Matter, because they want to be able to churn it so that way it's pointed back at them, when they should just be focusing on somebody other than themselves.
I like that what you mentioned though about like during the riot. Oh, not riot at the time. It was literally just a peaceful protest where like the group of like the white people were actually separating like in between like the people of the color and then like the police. Like, so those are examples of what people can do with like that privilege. Like, yeah, of course you're not gonna 100% ever understand what the lived experience is of like with all the people there of color during this time. So, use that privilege for like a way to fight with them, essentially, quote unquote fight, essentially, is staying with them.
And when they got attacked too, just not as harshly. Like, to me, I don't, I see this as also a socioeconomic issue. Like, if we had money, if we had the power, we would be able to make changes to the law through our money, through, endorsing and paying off these politicians, donating money to the police force and forcing them to act a certain way in order for them to receive that money.
Yeah.
And the sad part is, due to institutional racism, through the system that we're in right now, the system,
systemic racism.
We are at a disadvantage compared to others. And it saddens me, because I know this is something that affects everybody across the board, but Black people of color the most.
Because they have been seen for generation and after generation after generation to be kind of categorized as criminals and poor.
Yeah.
So it has definitely been imbued. It's been generationally imbued to view people of color as less than. And for a police system to police in a way that it's always been policing, which is to categorize one group of people as inferior and more prone to violence.
Did you end up going to any of the other days?
No, so I've kind of just been sitting back, waiting for it to really calm down.
Mm-hmm.
I do plan on going, in the next few days. I do want to go again. I'd really like to get my dad out there with me. I don't know if he'll ever be comfortable with it, but I feel like, especially after the protest yesterday in North Park, there were over 2,000 people there, and they were marching down the street. And from what I've heard so far, there was not one instance of
I do believe it's because
brutality.
of the pressure that you guys put on the police after the first day, because although I have not seen it in mainstream media news channels, it's definitely news downtown that the police instigated the flashbangs on the first protest. So I do believe that they're kind of on their best behavior now, but that's also because there's been more and more show of white people at these protests. And I don't think that's coincidence.
And the live streams.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like the live streams
Are holding them accountable.
Is holding them accountable, yeah.
Yeah, I was watching one on the first day, actually. So it's really cool to hear your perspective on that, because I was kind of wondering, there was this guy that was filming, and you do hear the distance of the explosions going on, and at times I wasn't even aware if you could tell if there were rubber bullets not being shot at. So it's hearing someone that say that was the case, I mean, it's insane. So it's now, since that has happened, yeah, I do think that a lot of the cops have probably been starting to seem at least like they're being held accountable.
And I was under the impression that the rubber bullets were kind of only shot once at a time. So to hear her say that it sounded like machine grade guns, that's gonna hurt people. That's gonna hurt people. You don't show up with that intending for it not to hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, they were ready. Their fingers were on the trigger the second they approached the crowd.
Which any gun enthusiast knows, you're never supposed to put your finger on that trigger unless you plan to kill something or shoot something.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's
that's gun safety 101 right there.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's really all of my questions. You answered all of them and then some. So honestly, any other input you have it would just be whatever you feel like letting us know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really. I mean, it I can't even explain how much joy it brings, especially as somebody of color that's lived through it, to see the whole world finally standing up and saying enough is enough. It's not just Black people, as the president so likes to refer to us as thugs, doing things that warrant, violent police behavior. And it's not, we're not hearing white people saying, oh, well, you had to have done something to warrant that. Finally, the whole world is saying, Black people have been targeted for centuries, for literally no reason, but you're darker than other people.
Yeah, and to just show up to the protest and kind of walk is, in a sense, kind of trivializing your entire experience, because you showed up because you had these experiences, because you know what you went through, because you're with a group of people who also know what you went through. But that's also why it can be dangerous to kind of just show up to protest without understanding the full depth of it and understanding the scope of what your friends of color have gone through, because that goes back to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode where Aunt Viv said you're trivializing the entire struggle.
Yeah.
So it is kind of intense. It's intense that the fact that the police fired into an unarmed crowd, an unprovoking crowd, on the first day of protest in San Diego really kind of proved their point. They played themselves, but they also hurt people in the process. That should never have happened.
Yeah. They also had snipers on the rooftops.
Oh, I
Yeah.
did see
Wow.
those.
Yeah, I heard about that. I wasn't like completely sure if that was the case, but I
Yeah.
mean, it makes perfect sense.
Every person we've
They
talked
had
to
them
so
on the
far has
rooftop.
said that.
Wow.
I'm not sure why you would need snipers in a crowd, though. That's
Especially with the fact that like you put so many other people in harm's way.
Yeah.
Because regardless of how good of a sharpshooter you are, there is
There's
still a lot of risk involved.
Yeah.
Especially in a crowd like that.
Can I share something that happened to my dad too with you?
Sure.
So my father, he was a pastor in LA Watts in 1992 during the LA riots. He and his friends went to the crowds that were protesting, the people that were out there, and they started spreading flyers and preaching the gospel.
Oh wow.
I think it was a group of like 5 of them, and while he was there, preaching and again like exercising his First Amendment right of practicing religion, he also got him and his friends were attacked by the police officers who were there, who saw somebody of color, immediately assumed that they were a threat, and one of his friend had hit their skull like bashed in.
Jeez.
And that was the first thing my dad had told me when I mentioned I wanted to go protest. He's like, don't. They can't tell the difference between a protester or somebody else because they don't care. They want to keep everything silent. They want to keep everybody quiet, and and they said like whatever happens, it's free game. And just the fact that like I knew the story beforehand, but he had to tell me, and like don't risk it.
And you hear it in a new light when you want to protest,
Right.
when it's time for you.
And just the fact that we have generation after generation of people who have been attacked, who are warning the next generation not to do it, only adds to the system that's in place of keeping the oppression going. Because if people aren't exercising, people aren't acting, then that means that they keep the power.
But that also poses how many people have to get hurt, how many people have to die, how many people have died undocumented,
Right.
without settlements that weren't white.
Yeah. And the rest of his friends, I think 3 of them got arrested. One of them was for the charge of assaulting an officer because he was bashing in the skull, and they punched them trying to free their friend from getting hurt.
Yeah.
Which goes back to Devan.
Yeah.
This is the same thing that happened to what she just said.
Mm-hmm.
So someone was reacting in self-defense, and then somebody acted in defense of their fellow citizen, only to be arrested for assaulting a police officer. That seems like a setup.
So, like, that's why, like, when your story just kept me in shock, just knowing that my family isn't the only one dealing with these issues.
Yeah.
And, like, it's saddening. Like, it makes me so sad. It makes me mad. It makes me want to do something about it. And I do think, like, right now, we are in an amazing time where people can finally have the conversation that they've been avoiding their entire lives. And then like how did you feel about things like the blackout, where people were asked to just focus on this one issue for once instead of posting about themselves? What was your reaction when you saw that on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook, and all that?
It was really cool to see the amount of people that, blacked out their picture. But at the same time, that I didn't really care as much about that, because for a lot of people, like I've been, actively on Facebook posting about this, and I have gotten into it with several people, some of which I've deleted, some of which I haven't. But a lot of people that I saw, blacking out their pictures, it was almost like it was just for show for them. Like they're
the trend.
Like people that are focusing on the rioting and talking about how wrong it is, and stealing's not going to do anything, but then they're going to black out their pictures. It's like, okay, well, you're focused more on goods with companies, billion-dollar companies that have insurance, rather than people's lives that are being stolen, but then you're going to post a black picture, and then people would post black pictures and then keep posting on Facebook, posting memes, it's that for me, it was more for show than
and I mean, that's
actually
kind of a
getting
new issue that's just been coming up with the rise of social media, because you have Instagrammers treating the protests like it's Coachella.
Yeah, it's fake activism.
Exactly.
And then
so much.
I have someone I know, like, very well, very personally, who called out these people and tagged them in his, because he didn't have a Twitter, but he had an Instagram, where he said, some of these people I see blacking out their pictures on social media are the same people that called me the N-word in school.
God.
So, like,
Yeah.
I can see the mixed feelings about it, because on one hand, you do want to show a show of solidarity. You want to show your support. But social media is so easy to post that it's easy to be like, this is my contribution.
Exactly.
It's literally just a trend. Like, that's more of a trend. For me, if you really want to show your solidarity, you really want to show your support, you really want to make a change, then go to the protest, march with everybody, talk to your kids about it. Even white people. Talk to your kids. Race, like, black kids aren't anything that you should ever be afraid of. People are so scared to discuss race, especially with their children. That's where it starts. It starts with the kindergartners. Talk to your kids about it. Let them know, yes, your friend, yes, he's darker. Yes, he is of a different race. It doesn't make him any different. It doesn't make him scary. But you can't tiptoe around race and expect racism to go away. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Because like I said, it's like a lot of this has to do with like how generations teach the next generation like how to to feel, and this is part of their culture, and suddenly it's just like they end up having a lot of racist tendencies because of the fact that that's how like they're raised. So I agree, they need to be able to confront these tough questions and everything right away from the beginning, so that way they can actually become empathetic.
Yeah.
And like, so
I mean, go ahead.
I was saying that like I studied psychology in school because I just wanted to be able to heal people through conversation. And something that I learned in my childhood development class was that kids do start seeing race at an early age, and they start using it as a way of learning how to adopt themselves, because they're gonna see people that look like them, and they're gonna start relating to them. So like right here it says that children as young as 2 use race to reason other people's behavior. By 30 months, most children will use race to choose playmates, because you're looking for people that are like you.
That's why I thought I was Chinese for like the first 6 years of my life, because I watched Mulan. But and here's I think that was the only conversation I had with my parents about race, because I grew up in a mixed family, so it was kind of just there. But I do remember my parents telling me over and over again that I wasn't Chinese, and I just didn't want to believe it. So yeah, no, I remember being real young. I remember I shouldn't be able to remember that, but for people who say that like it takes until kindergarten to see race, no.
By kindergarten, children show many of the same racial attitudes as their parents.
Yeah, because you're at that point you're adopting the methods that you just kind of copycat how your parents react.
That and it's like, kids especially, people especially, there's so much more racism than what people really realize. Like, yes, police specifically right now are being watched, but it's so far beyond that. Like, I have plenty of friends that know they're not the definition of racist, but they'll say things to me like, oh, well, you don't act black. Oh, well, you don't talk like a black person. I didn't even know you were black. Oh, well, you're not that black. Like, I'm darker than you are. Or, I have a friend, we're trying to look for an apartment together, and she, unfortunately, she grew up in that white privilege bubble. She grew up all white family. They come from money. And this girl, I'm not even kidding when I tell you, she will not live anywhere outside of like Ocean Beach. She is genuinely terrified to live east, because to her, she feels like it's unsafe, and I don't take it offensively, but
No,
that's
but
just how she was raised. That's how white kids are raised. Being in a situation where there are more people of color than there are white people is dangerous. It's deemed dangerous because kids are taught people of color are more likely to be violent.
Which is
you're
funny
more likely
because-
to see theft and shooting.
Right.
Which is funny because Ocean Beach is, like, yes, it is very white, but it also is white people kind of appropriating everything else that goes on in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
So
But I mean,
it's
that's just white people. They don't want to live in Spring Valley because why? Because Spring Valley is mostly people of color, which to them it's just instilled in them in a young age. That means it's an unsafe neighborhood. That means it's ghetto. That means people are poor. People steal. My car's more likely to get broken into. I'm more likely to get attacked coming home late from work. Like, that's just what's instilled in them. And I'm not saying that they have racist parents. It's just that's how people are brought up, to fear people of color, which is why I say, if you really want to do something, talk to your kids, talk to young kids, explain to them that whereas, everyone doesn't look like you. Yeah, there are people that are darker than you. It doesn't mean they're dangerous. It doesn't mean they're any different. They just look different than you do.
Exactly. Yeah, one of the most damaging things you can say to someone, something along the lines of oh, you're one of the good ones. That is definitely a very racist statement.
or you don't look like what you are. You don't look like your identity.
Yeah.
Or you don't, or you're educated, not like the rest of them.
You don't talk like you're black. Yeah. Oh my God. I wish I had $1 for every time somebody said you don't look black, or you don't talk like you're black, or can I touch your hair? Can you wash it? Just the most ignorant questions. But again, it's what I grew up with. It's become accustomed to me.
Yeah.
That to me is normal. Getting that question, it doesn't even offend me anymore. I just be like, you're stupid. That's the dumbest question I've ever heard. Sometimes I'll answer it. It's so normal to me, and I don't want to have kids grow up in that kind of environment. I don't want my kids to be asked, can you wash your hair? Oh, what are you? I'm human. I'm not defined by my race.
Which is why a lot of people don't understand of what this whole protest is. It's it goes beyond just one person being killed by the police. It's everything having to do with the Black Lives Matter movement and all these things come into question, all that, because a lot of people need to actually open their eyes and realize that's the case. It's a different lived experience.
Exactly.
Well, thanks again, Devin. This was incredibly insightful, and I would love to speak more on this with you.
Yeah.
In person.
Absolutely.
You sound like an amazing person, and I would love to meet you.
And if you do go to a protest
not
again,
to toot my own horn, but beep beep.
Yeah, and if you do go to a protest again, I would be willing to go with you.
Yeah, I definitely want to go this week. I'm waiting for my shirt. I ordered a shirt that said I can't breathe, and I'm waiting for that to come in. And then I definitely want to go.
Yeah, I don't have any more questions.
That's all for me. It's unless Josh has any more questions.
No, I mean, that was honestly very insightful to hear. And again, I thank you so much for sharing, everything that you had gone through with that. Because, I mean, both from just your own personal experience of the past to just what you saw in that whole thing with the protest on the first day. We've already seen so much different types of perspectives here when it came to everything here in San Diego. So it's really cool to hear that.
Thank you for opening up on your trauma. I know it wasn't your responsibility, but we very much appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like I said, it is literally just life at this point.
So much.
That makes it so much worse.
I know it makes it sound awful, but I don't. I don't
if it's any consolation. Yeah, it sounds awful not because you say it, but because of the casualty in which the comfortable tone in which you're this is what I'm used to.
Exactly.
So we never want to get to that point, but we obviously are at that point now. So how can we move forward from here?
And how can we make it so it's no longer a casual thing? It's more of a shock that it happens to you. if anything were if a shock to anybody if it were to happen to anybody.
But in conclusion, I did like what you said, Devin, earlier when you said, when I talk to my kids about this, I can say I was there when before the police reform. So that is incredibly hopeful to see that it does, like, has to be the end. Like, there's going to be protests until there is reform.
Exactly.
So this will be known as the reform.
Yeah, and to me, that's something that's gonna be empowering for the next generation of showing that incremental progress is still progress, and you will eventually get there. But all it takes is a lot of people who have strength, who are doing it despite themselves, and like that to me, like just seeing you guys and hearing your story to me is just an example of strength. It shows that not only do your lives matter, but that you guys are courageous, that you guys are strong, because you are still fighting for your basic rights. Like that's the part. Like
in the face of adversity.
Exactly.
And tear gas.
Fuck tear gas.
All right, thank you again, Devin. We will definitely, hopefully, speak more on this.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. Have a good night and be
Thanks
safe
for having
out
me.
there.
You too.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
So I'm gonna go home and cry.
Definitely a reasonable, action to have.
I had no idea that it was more than one attack from the cops.
Mm-hmm.
There was no reason for more than one attack, or even one attack in general. Like there was no cause. It's just injustice at that point.
And like I didn't know that she was there until she posted about it on Facebook when she said,
really?
I was there. We were on our knees. Our hands are up. This was wrong.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I saw that I was like, this person I know was there. That hits home for me, because then it gets personal.
And I think that's something that, should give us more of a reason to be there, because a lot of people aren't going to care until it's someone that they know, someone that they care for.
Them.
Yeah.
Until it's selfish.
Until it enters their social circles.
Yeah. No, honestly, yeah.
And that's where the issue lies, is that it shouldn't have to penetrate your social circles for you to care.
Right.
You like, if the goal of the American dream is that everyone is equal under the eyes of the law, why don't you want this? Why wouldn't you want this to be equal under the eyes of the law too? Like, if you want the same rights afforded to you as afforded to a criminal, as afforded to your neighbor, your law-abiding neighbor as well as your criminal neighbor, you should be for this. That's my impression of this, is that this is literally about equality.
To me, like whenever I talk about rights, I have to remind people that whatever is happening to somebody else will apply to you at some point. As we saw during these protests, that this is a system that was against black people, that were against people of color. And the moment that the white people decided to join them, they got to experience their rights being taken away to a closer extent to what's going on to them.
And they punched a pillow. They punched a police pillow.
They punched the police. Exactly. I mean, yeah, exactly.
Like that's why, like when it comes down to like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and all that, whatever happens to your neighbor, to somebody who is the exact opposite of you in any way possible, can happen to you. And because they've set the precedent that is okay to do that to somebody.
And that's what it is. The precedent right now is that fully armed, militarized police can attack peaceful protesters with zero repercussions. The only repercussion is that people in social media know about it.
Yeah.
There's been no police arrests. I know that they have released some people who were arrested at the protest without their phones, without their personal effects, for the sake of evidence. And that's what's frustrating, is because, okay, if you like Captain America, and if you watch that movie, and if you watch Captain America Winter Soldier, and you understand that, then this applies. This is happening now. This is okay. This is Star Wars.
I was about to say, it's like, yeah, you should bring in
This is
any like pop culture
literally-
movie. It's all about
Yeah.
like rebellion against like an imperialistic type of like dictatorship, and what's going on in the U.S. right now very much is leading to a lot of fascism.
I'm gonna call out all the Second Amendment rights fighters right now.
Yeah,
You were saying that you wanted your Second Amendment to be able to fight a tyrannical government that is taking away people's rights. Right now is your chance to stand alongside your brothers and sisters who are
and
fighting
carry your guns to these
Exactly.
protests.
and and protect them. Protect the people that are in your community. Protect
Protect your neighbors.
your neighbors, and even protect the businesses that you're there.
Yeah, protect the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Protect what you
can
want to
protect
do.
like, you know, small businesses and fight for
Yeah.
you know, black equality at the same time.
Like,
I don't
well,
think they're
yeah.
mutually exclusive. Like, no.
Like those can be synonymous.
Exactly.
I already know that there are businesses in downtown San Diego that are boarded up,
Yep.
and they literally have typed or spray painted local business on them.
Yeah, and I just love seeing the murals that came out of it too.
Yeah.
It really is a new age for art.
Oh,
Which-
definitely.
Because there was I did pass a street artist. I passed a street artist in on Park Boulevard in downtown, and she was making a Motown mural on one of the electrical boxes. So it's funny because once I saw that, I realized every other box or every other piece of art that I had seen was either ambiguous, like there was no real race to it.
Yeah.
Or
Artistic stuff,
Yeah,
huh?
or it artistically was like, you know, a white feminine, a white masculine, and this was the first black mural that I had
Tight.
seen. And it was amazing because it was Motown. Because how can you have music without Motown?
I can't.
So it made me happy. It was very colorful. It was very out there. It was a very artistic piece, and I will walk by that all the time, and I stare at it now. Because that's what it's about, is that it is a new age for art because we're entering a new age. This is officially the 20s. How did it start? Like this.
Yep. Like, look at that live stream right now, Denver right now.
And then
Everyone's
it's
just
Yeah.
completely lined up, ready to go.
And I want to continue the conversation about art. I brought it up yesterday, and I would love to bring it up again. If you've consumed black media, black art,
which you have. You
Yeah,
have.
you
have
100%
in some
have.
You
way,
absolutely have.
Yep.
like even if you do country, you know,
If you watch movies,
If
if
you watch-
you listen to music, if you walk outside, you consume black art.
yeah,
You've heard Michael Jackson one time, bro. Like, come on.
Also,
like they've
I believe that
been telling.
Yeah.
Sorry, William. I just gonna explain the Denver, Colorado one. Apparently, they just today announced that they cannot use tear gas or flashbangs. They've been sued twice already by
In
the
Denver?
people in Denver.
Oh.
Hell yeah.
They can't
Sue them.
do that, but it seems like people are taking everything towards the police station.
So now that
So
they
this is the
know
police
that that's
station.
not going to be used, they're kind of like really gathering more of the numbers now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
And again,
it's getting pretty
tear
interesting.
gas in the middle of a pandemic of a respiratory disease.
Yeah, I think that was 100% the right move to do,
Yeah.
honestly. Come on.
Yeah.
Dude, because when you're coughing, like, that's just increasing the spread at that point.
Yep.
At that point, the officers are also damaging themselves, hurting themselves and hurting their communities.
In Atlanta, that was an instance where the cops fired tear gas in Atlanta and the wind actually pushed it back.
Oh, yeah.
into
Damn.
the-
God was like, no.
Oh my god, there's so
No,
many
you.
of those
The
act of
wind
God
said,
2
"No,
things.
you."
There was like one like lightning strike apparently
Yeah, it-
injured 2 officers.
2 officers got hit with lightning.
It's crazy.
2, not officers, sorry, National Guard.
Oh, National Guard.
It was National
God
Guards.
spoke, guys.
Yeah.
God
Badass.
spoke, Zeus spoke, the wind spoke. That
Nature is, you know, probably on protesters' side because they see that, you know, we're one Earth, we're one group of people that need to be united right now.
He's like, I finally got some time to heal because you guys were all inside. Now let's cause some healing in our country.
there's always going to be criticism.
Oh, of course.
There's always going to be criticism. So that's why I just want to point out that the criticism for the Black Lives Matter protest is so incredibly trivial. that at this point you're just reaching. I've at this point we've heard every rebuttal. We've heard, oh, but riots, oh, but this,
Yeah.
oh, but pandemic.
Yeah,
oh,
I mean,
but
honestly, you're
COVID.
right. I haven't heard any like new thing come out besides like that whole criticism about George Floyd's past and everything. Which again, like it's like they're trying to hold. It shows how much of a reach they're trying to do in terms of trying to like bring down the Black Lives Matter movement in any inch, and that is what they're fighting against. Is the people that feel like they need to like be fighting against them when in reality.
Well,
They're on the wrong side of history.
The reality is, like, it's unnecessary. Like, this is enough. This is done. People are dying.
Yeah.
Devin, like, I believe Devin when she says that if the cops didn't see the kids in the car, they probably would have shot her dad.
Yeah.
I believe that.
100% believe that too. Yeah, it's so messed up to even think that that's the case, but it's true, and that's the reality we're in.
And I'm sure that the reason why they were more afraid to shoot him was because of the public outlash that will come out if that story hits.
Because killing a black man has less consequences as a police officer than killing a black man in front of 2 minors.
Yep.
In front of children. His children in particular. Like, that story would have got... They were worried about the PR aspect of that. And
as
that's,
opposed to the fact that, this is the right,
Yeah.
thing to do or whatever. It's like, no, they didn't care about morals. This is
so,
the business.
which is why, like, I personally believe that a big change that we can do in our system is increase accountability. If your body cam turns off, you are accountable for that webcam not working.
100%.
At that point, like, your word goes down as a result.
And then it goes back to what Lamar said, whereas if you leave your body cam in the car, that's on you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, not only is the accountability on you, but so is the loophole.
Yeah. And also going to, like the unions and all that, there needs to be a force that's outside of the prosecution and outside of the police department. Because remember, the DA needs the police help when it comes down to convictions and all that. They need to work, they work together. Like, it's kind of weird, asking your coworker, like, hey, I need your help with this. And also, send me evidence to prove that, that you did something bad and that you should be going to jail.
But a really good example of that is the film Just Mercy, which is now free on Amazon Prime because the creators were like, this is kind of necessary given the current state of affairs. But if you want to do something other than just watch how beautiful Michael B. Jordan is on screen, he has an incredible message there. And also, Brian Stevenson, who is the person, the real-life person that he plays, who started Equal Justice Initiative, who literally, it is a story of a black kid who went to an Ivy League school who is giving back to his community because he is trying to provide equal justice for people who have been wrongly convicted. Obviously, all black men in the start of the movie. One of them, his name was Herbert, and he was a black man that got drafted into the Vietnam War, fought in Vietnam. He was the only survivor of an ambush, came back, had PTSD, was never afforded a hospital, was never afforded like any sort of mental help. And he ended up having a mental break, and I believe he killed a woman in the process, so he ended up on death row. But the argument was he should have been in a hospital, not in jail. And if he had been given hospital time before, when he was having these outbursts initially, which were going on for years before his mental break, then he wouldn't have needed to die.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing is that that's juxtaposed with two other people in the story that, if you watch the movie, you'll find out their names. But one was convicted because an officer looked at his mugshot and said he looked guilty just because of his picture, which goes back to generational racism, because you're programmed to believe that if you look at a black man, that's the face of a criminal. And then you have the main character who was thrown in jail because police wanted so badly to arrest somebody for this unsolved murder that they were willing to put an innocent man in jail without proper defense.
And that's something that, output is something that a lot of officers and use to keep track of the numbers. What is the output? How many tickets are you giving? How many arrests? How many of this? Target. I'm gonna bring out Target. People were mad that Target was getting looted in Minnesota. No, sorry, Minneapolis, right?
Yeah, Minneapolis,
Yeah.
Minnesota.
So Minneapolis specifically, Target gave money to the police department, but they were focusing on the output of cases when it comes down to small crime. So in order, again, when I was talking about big corporations and people with money, so in order for them to keep that income coming in for their forensics, they had to make sure that they were convicting people through the output. Otherwise, they will see the money as being useless, so they will take it away. I wonder who they targeted in Minneapolis, where this whole situation started. Who did they target in their communities?
Especially
to make
because
that output
Target
happen?
was also a really big advocate of policing that area. Not because it was high in crime, but because it was high in low-level crime. So you had loiters, you had the occasional drug user walking about, you had homelessness, but people wanted to clean that up.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna crack down on offenses, you're gonna try to clean up an area that's filled with undesirable people. Not people who are committing serious crimes, not people who you would expect to be in jail for the war on crime, but you have people who are being policed because they're being unnecessarily policed. So yeah, when that's imbued on you for so many generations, you're gonna kind of see yourself as one of the criminals eventually.
But people don't want to see everything about Target in such a dark light right away, because Target's like the best place to
No,
shop.
You mean
at,
Target?
Target's where you go where you want to spend more money, where you spend a little bit more money to avoid going to Walmart.
Exactly.
Walmart's just kind of like Target's a white Walmart.
Basically, that's literally it.
That's
yeah,
why
you hit
we
the nail
didn't
on
have
the
a
head.
Target in Hawaii until like 2015.
Oh, really?
We didn't have a Target in Hawaii. So I didn't know what Target was till I moved here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of call for defunding the police department.
Yeah.
Right now I keep seeing defund SDPD, defund NYPD.
And it's not even defund the police
Yeah.
completely. It's take this extra money that you're spending on lawsuits, convict these dirty cops, not the good cops. Make it easy for the good cops to do good cop work. Make it hard for bad cops to continue being bad cops. Take all the money you're spending on settlements for these bad cops and give it to the community. Give it into education. Give it into job research. Give it into housing funds. It's so expensive to live in San Diego. Here's
Change that.
Here we go.
Yeah, and
Everyone's unemployed. Here you go. Here you go.
dude, all right. So again with the riot gear, one riot outfit could have given so much PPE during a middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Why is it that we have all these riot gear ready to go and not a stockpile?
How is the National Guard? Do you know how expensive it is to activate the National Guard?
Yeah.
We could have had
I just
aid
didn't
for
know, like,
COVID-19.
How much
we could
is
have
it
had
really for
tests for COVID-19. We could have had cures for vaccines. We could have had so much aid. We didn't have
Right.
to import tests from South Korea. But one state did, because he was tired of waiting. And suddenly, as soon as black people have a say on anything in the country, suddenly it's, National Guard.
So we have the
Oh,
money to be
yes.
able to stop
Oh.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
No, I
that's when
hate
we
that
realized
so much.
that NYPD has $1.2 billion that's like at their that's a B.
Yeah.
That's not even a million. That's like
Yep.
that's Bill Gates money.
That's money
That's
that
not Donald
the
Trump.
common
That's
person cannot
Bill
even
Gates
quantify,
money.
honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the social workers and all them are struggling. Teachers literally are spending their own money in school supplies.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's-
Like,
yeah.
Teachers come out of debt from college just to go into debt into teaching. If you want a better society, educate. Like, educate, job funding, job careers. You don't want people on the streets or addicted to drugs. Create addiction centers, create rehab centers, create homeless shelters.
and also focus on like a form of decriminalization where you don't arrest the users, you arrest the suppliers, the dealers, the people who are causing harm. Like that's something that was the war on drugs was created specifically during the civil rights movement in order to attack the civil rights
Yeah.
activists
Yeah.
and anti-war protesters.
This was actually a tactic used by the Nixon administration. I have.
Yeah,
the
they
name-
admitted it.
I have the name here, but it was it was John Ehrlichman, where he admitted to targeting blacks and hippies during the 13th Amendment because the hippies were predominantly associated with weed.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when there's a conspiracy that hasn't been proven, but as the conspiracy goes, the government released crack cocaine into black communities, got them addicted to crack cocaine, so that they could have reason to start a war on drugs, even though they knew they were lying. So they're
it's the Contra, because remember the theory is that the CIA was using the money that was being created by selling drugs to the blacks to support anti-communist movements in like Colombia. It was essentially a black ops thing, and it's not the first time that the U.S. government has gotten caught disrupting black communities. There was also, I think it was the tuberculosis or syphilis.
There were many.
Yeah, where they injected American citizens who happened to be black, and I want to say that in that way, but let's be more honest. They were targeting black people, giving them syphilis, not treating them, only to do research on them. That is shit that the Nazis were doing.
Which is also how the father of gynecology found most of his findings.
Yeah.
Because he believed that black women didn't feel as much pain. So he operated on them without anesthesia. Wow. And that's a whole nother argument. But the other interesting thing is, you want to go into the war on drugs. Cocaine, like powder cocaine and crack cocaine. Crack was criminalized harder than powder cocaine because the people holding powder cocaine were white men, were white people, typically coming in through Miami.
Yep.
And the people holding crack cocaine were typically black people.
Yep.
So that's why during the war on drugs, crack cocaine was more harshly punished and weed was more harshly punished, and cocaine, it's not necessarily that they got off with a slap on the wrist, but typically the people who were holding cocaine.
Yeah, like why is it that black people's sentences can be up to 4 times longer and have 4 times the extra conviction rate when the usage is the same?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when it came down to marijuana. Like, and then so again, going with the system.
When black people smoke, it's seen as an addiction, but when white people smoke, it's seen as being a hippie.
Yeah, and exactly, and just to continue with the system. So you have a generation of people that were attacked for their usage of marijuana that was the same exact usage as white people. So these black people were arrested, were removed from their communities. Were raided. And then you had a generation of kids that were raised without a parent.
And then they make fun of these kids for having no dad.
For having no dad.
Yep.
And then because of, not gerrymandering, redlining, and just basically they were forced into these very specific poor neighborhoods. The mom had to be working full time, chances are multiple jobs, to be able to sustain a decent life for the child. These children were then without a father figure and without a consistent motherly presence. What were they going to do? They saw their family struggling. They wanted to get out of those neighborhoods, and the idea of be able to make money through drugs, so creating a cycle of oppression. And I know, like, people were saying, it's a choice. Yes, it is still a choice. But when you are in there, you do not feel like you have a choice.
And also, what other choice do you have when everything you know is that you don't have your parents because they're working to give you the bare minimum?
Yeah.
You're going to want to work. You're going to want to contribute.
You're going to want to hustle. That is something that's just naturally. We all want to make money. We all want to be.
But if you don't have the means to escape your community, you can't escape it.
You want to live, not just survive.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like, you created this cycle, and let's not forget for the people who went to prison and came back out. What kind of jobs can you get as a former inmate?
Yeah.
As a convict.
Convicts,
you have no choice really but to go back into doing crime.
Yeah.
Like that's why when I say defund the police, I mean take some of that money and focus on the root of the problem, which is education, jobs, and
Cyclical poverty.
and mental health.
Yeah.
I believe like hearing the stories of our friends here that we talk to on the phone, hearing their stories and the trauma that they've gone through. That was a question I forgot to ask her. It was like, how do you feel now about it? And from what I can tell, she was saying that she just
It's the norm.
it's normal for her. She
yeah.
repressed it to a point where it doesn't affect her anymore as a way to survive.
And she remembers every detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that it happens under situations of extreme duress.
Yep.
You remember everything. And I have no doubt that she remembered everything that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like I said, we want to create a world where police is not the first thing you think of when you see a homeless person tweaking or anything like that. Your first thought shouldn't be he needs to be arrested. It should be let's get him the help that he needs, and let's get him a job. Let's get him clean. Let's do something good, not just let's go put him into a prison, and so that we don't think about him anymore. Like that's how we're gonna fix our economy. Even you have more people working, more people that can have jobs, more people that are educated that can do even greater and bigger things. That's how you fix it. And that's one of the reasons I know even in the poverty levels in LA, a lot of them were taught that they will never make it because of the system, that they don't even bother trying to go to get higher education, which higher education is also a trap in and of itself because it gets people into debt, and as a person of color, it's also harder to get a job.
Yep.
And it goes back to if you divest from the police and you invest in education, it would be more affordable. People wouldn't need to be going $60,000 in debt straight out of school for a job that starts off at $29,000.
Yep.
Like, are you kidding me? I don't want to have to ask my parents for money once I graduate because that's the goal of getting a degree. So you don't have to rely on your parents.
Yeah.
And then this happens, and you're going to go back to your parents. It's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Quick thing. We just got a new feed for LA. It looks pretty interesting.
I do need to say something about
They're clashing
people
with the
who
police
like
right
to
now.
use these protests as their new Coachella specifically.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Influencers.
I was
Because they
seeing
got
a bunch of the
canceled,
pictures
everything's
and
gone.
everything, Yeah.
Yeah,
This is an excuse for people to go meet up with their friends.
But I've seen it's so funny because I've seen some of these ones like on Twitter do like videos of them literally just like stay in the middle of the street. They pose, they're holding the picture,
And
but
then
like
they
the
leave.
white chicks are all like dressed all nice and shit and everything, and
Yeah.
then like they go back into their car and just drive away.
Yeah, that's the
No.
thing is that if this isn't your life, if you're not fully committed to it, you've proven your point. Just don't go.
Exactly.
Also, the other thing about, and this is incredibly important to photographers who are going into the protest, do not take pictures of people's face. If you are posing for a picture, that's an automatic out. You're not there for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to the protest, it's not about you. It is not about your place in the protest. It is about that you are there to contribute to this protest.
Yeah.
At the Ferguson riots, someone pointed out to me before, a lot of these pictures ended up winning Pulitzer Prizes. They ended up winning awards. They ended up becoming extremely moving pieces of photojournalism. But the subjects in those pictures ended up dead a few years later.
Oh,
wow.
so
I heard
what-
about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was reading
yeah,
about
yeah.
that too, and that's why they were
So-
trying to not have like your face shown or
Yeah,
anything.
so what good are you
identification.
doing if you're going to these protests and you're taking pictures of people's faces?
Exactly.
If you want to take pictures of people's faces, take it of the officers.
Yeah.
Because their badges are covered.
Yep.
The only
Yep.
thing they have to show is their face, and it's under a shield. So they should be protected for the most part. The other thing is that you don't go to these protests as a photographer expecting to hit it big, because this is not about you. This is about people who have been killed institutionally and systemically over
Seems
the
like the
course
police
of
is
so many
retreating in
generations.
LA.
It's
Oh,
retreating.
wow. Yeah, they're backing up and
They're
everything.
backing up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
and don't forget, LA, they lost a lawsuit too of the curfew.
Yeah, they did.
And I know the not the mayor, the chief. He's been under a lot of scrutiny for how it's been happening because remember, LA has a lot of history of riots
yeah.
and the National Guard coming in.
Yep.
And it kind of goes back to these people who have their phones out. They're facing the front. They're looking at the cops because you want to be in these instances where it is very obviously over time and time again proven that police have instigated riots rather than
Yeah, we heard firsthand from your friend earlier about how they were just seeing the cops doing all that, the rioters and everything immediately.
So again, if you do not want to put your fellow protesters in danger, which is the goal, you're literally fighting to live at this point. Don't take pictures of protesters' faces. Don't take pictures of any identifying marks, jewelry, tattoos, anything. You can take pictures of signs. Make sure it doesn't show their face. If their hair is colored, make sure that they have hoodies up to their necks so you can't see if they have or don't have any tattoos. Make sure that the pictures you have of the protests are of the protests and not of individuals, unless the individual is a police officer who is instigating something or showing an act of good graces.
Yeah.
But this also goes even further because there have been photo ops with police officers and protesters of them supposedly kneeling down in solidarity before getting up. And so
there was literally a video earlier. There was like they were doing like the Macarena with like the people and all that, and everyone's just retweeting like, "Don't fall for this." This is not what they're doing this for.
But this is about being responsible because you don't want more people to die. You don't want to go in there with the intention of this. Look at how I'm helping. Look at me as a white savior.
It is not about you.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like it is about a collective effort to stop the bad police from continuing bad policing policies.
Exactly.
So this is about reform, and this is about a collective group reform. So by photographing yourself and treating this like an Instagram opportunity, by showing up to take a picture then leaving, one, trivializing the entire process. I can't even begin to explain as a journalist how angry that makes me because that it should not be about likes. It should not be about you. If this was really about the protest as you say it is in your picture, you wouldn't be showing your face. You wouldn't be dressing up for it. Because this isn't about you. It's not about showing up in your best riot outfit. It's not about showing up and being cute.
Their suffering is not your aesthetic.
And this goes exactly because it goes back to the whole idea of appropriation is that you cannot take people's suffering and use it as a platform for you to get likes. Because that's frustrating because we just heard how people are literally dying, how people could have died, how police officers are throwing unprovoked tear gas and rubber bullets into an unprovoking crowd. Yes, like that's frustrating.
And may I add too that even though they are using non-lethal force, they are still hurting these people for the long term. There are people that are blinded now. For the rest of their lives, they will be blind. There are people whose lungs have been damaged, and for all we know, they may have had coronavirus, and they will probably die now as a result, or it would have activated it and actually have them show symptoms.
People getting knocked to the ground, getting their head hit and everything. It's like, all right, now you probably have some kind of permanent damage to the head.
So you have permanent head damage, you have bruised ribs. These are problems that may not be lethal, but will hurt these individuals for the rest of their lives and causing permanent damage.
And it will disproportionately hurt some people more than others.
Exactly.
Because then it goes into the health system.
Look at this street.
Like there's so many systems in place to prevent Black people and people of color
And the frustrating
from
thing,
living the best life they could possibly
live. It doesn't
live.
need to be that way now, but because it's been so ingrained, and because when you're being taught when you start a job that racial profiling is a part of your job. Yeah. When you're a student and you're saying, "Oh, I've seen people who are treated differently because, of their skin tone." And then you end up saying, "But I only want to work with elite athletes. I only want to work with people who are rich. I don't only want to work with these private sector people." Okay, so you've chosen your niche. So don't claim to be a part of this movement if you're not going to pursue this movement post-movement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for each person that put up a black square, I expect you to continue the conversation after this.
And for the dude who put up a black square after calling my friend an N-word lover, you know who you are.
Shame on you.
And you did that at a Christian college, too.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So this is the same Christian college that told, me and a few other people, Latino descent, that because Trump won, that we should go back to the country where we came from.
Oh,
I had somebody throw a burrito at me. It was full pitch perfect glory.
Wow.
I don't think I've shown my face in this podcast, but I had one of the professors told me that I had to lose my Mexican accent because we went to the same college.
I had a professor fail a student on a test when it came down to their accent, who was also from Mexico, and this was us studying abroad in that program in the UK when we were learning how they pronounced it there. She made her cry, and I'm going to talk about my personal experience there.
Please do.
Me and another Latino man that was there, we were harassed like crazy from those professors, and I felt like we were under a microscope because I think they assumed that we were there to cause problems, that we were going to do something, that we were going to act out, and when in reality the people who were doing the things that we weren't supposed to be doing, like drinking alcohol, like one of them went to Oktoberfest, and we got shit on for showing up a couple hours later, 2 grown men walking back from getting the bus dropping us off about a block away, just walking down the street in the residential area of London.
In the same experience that Lamar was speaking on earlier. So, you know this, we were on a ship for about 4 or 5 months. We went to 11 different countries during that time. And he, by far, has had more negative encounters based on race than I have. But the thing that I noticed that was incredibly prevalent to me from the second I boarded was that these people got away with a lot. These people got away with everything. And it's not to say that people were racist to me, because there were microaggressions, sure, and that's another story. But just because they weren't outright racist to me or they weren't outright racist to my friends, the amount of things that these people got away with was astounding. Because at one point they completely destroyed a hotel room in Ghana. The program that we're on was almost not allowed back in Ghana because of it. Directly after that, we ported in South Africa. On our last day, we were detained in the port for several hours because we were supposed to leave it was supposed to be about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And because it was so early in the day, people had decided that to take advantage of their last day in South Africa, they were going to try to get as drunk as humanly possible before they reboarded the ship. And every single person that got drunk tanked, they had to start cycling people out of the drunk tank because that's how many people were drunk.
Jeez.
But none of the people who made those decisions, aside from 1 or 2 who were with, a group of white people, none of those people who made those crazy decisions, who made the decision that did bring the authorities, because we were detained for 6 hours. We couldn't leave South Africa because so many people went through immigration drunk, which is illegal in South Africa. I just want to put that, you cannot be publicly drunk in South Africa. So many white people were drunk that we got stopped for 6 hours. And it was so embarrassing. But wait till you hear what happened in Japan. Wait till you hear what happened in Myanmar. It was everywhere we went.
Jeez.
It was like something crazy happened. And the crazy thing that happened never once involved one of the scholarship kids. Never once involved one of the minority kids. And it's not to say that we didn't have like a microscope on us, but it did feel. I do remember feeling very early on that I couldn't make friends with these people because they could walk into a room and be like, I can do this and I can get away with it, and I couldn't because I never grew up with that mentality, and then being alongside them showed me that I could not get away with that mentality.
Yeah.
So that's what was scary, was being confronted face to face with that fact. The first time I met Lamar was the first time that I came face to face with the fact that white privilege is real. Because I'd experienced that for 2 years at Loma without fully grasping, without putting words to that. And then you see that no matter, just because it's not Loma, like I'm thinking, okay, it's Loma, this is a bubble. People might get away with that. Definitely didn't mean to drop that, sorry. But, you know, it's a bubble. So I'm thinking this happens here. But then it happened in Colorado. And then it happened in San Diego. And then it happened in the UK. It happened in Germany. It happened in every single port that we hit. We got in trouble every single time. One time I had met up with someone who had previously gone on this program. And they did say, they kind of brought up in conversation, like, hey, so like what's kind of crazy happened now? Because then he was like, oh, when I was on this program, this happened. And it was all of these instances of people getting away with insane things, with people breaking the law. There's no other way to put it than white privilege.
Exactly.
Because it's
Just
not that
casual
they it's one, they didn't realize it. They would not. I don't think I could ever talk to these people about white privilege to their face, because it's that denial. Because to them, like, that's their life. Because I saw it firsthand. Like they walked into a room, immediately got drunk. They broke a bottle, stepped on it, walked all over the floor. Like, it's cool. It'll come out of the deposit.
Wow.
When you don't have that money to spare, you don't think like that.
Exactly.
When you always have that money to spare, you just don't think about it. So you don't think of white privilege as it pertains to you, because you don't see yourself without the money you grew up with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
And that's like, again, that was very similar to my experience when I was there with the program. On the last night in particular, that's the night that stood out to me, because we were no longer technically in the program. So people felt like they felt comfortable going a little bit more crazy. And so on the last night, I was like, look, I felt a lot of like microaggressions, I guess. Like I couldn't like fit into the group throughout the whole thing, but I'm like, it's the last night. Like, I don't care what's happened in the past. I get like whatever it is. So let's just have fun together. Let's just enjoy our last night. And they ended up, I didn't know they were going to be joining us, but we ended up in the same place. And oh boy, that was a shit show. They were getting drunk. One white guy spilled a brand new thing of cider on a Scottish person there who was built. Like, wow. He just like oh, and he's just like whatever, and he's like super drunk as hell. And I'm like, this dude was ready to kick his ass. Yeah. And like the entire time I was working damage control. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry about my friend here.
Of course it's on you. Of course it's on the person of color to be damage control, because to them somebody else is always taking care of it.
Yeah. And I did. I don't know how the hell I kept the situation calm. I ended up actually paying for his drink too, because I had a couple pounds left.
The dude who spilled it, or the dude who got spilled on?
The guy who got spilled on.
Okay.
Like I said, just trying to prevent a fight.
Yeah.
One of the white girls that was there, she was so wasted that she kept falling, like bumping into me. And there was a point where I grabbed her. I'm like, hey, are you okay? Do you need water? And she's like, oh, I'm fine. You know, and then she goes back to her friend group. I'm like, hey, make sure she's okay. I go back to my friends. I'm like, I'm tired of these people. Like, I just want to hang out with you guys. You guys are the people, my friends at this program that we got close. Only for the entire group, the entire group that we called, you know, the OC bitches by the end of this night, because they're like, you're making us uncomfortable. Can you please leave? And I'm like, I'm the one taking care of everybody here. I am making sure that this guy right here didn't get his butt whooped. That this person was calling a Scottish person English. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, like, which by the way was a question that
I do remember Tim telling me that.
Yeah,
but
no.
I also know from experience, you don't.
So that wasn't even the instance that our white professor told us to go ask people if they're English.
What?
Which, me, being an educated person who's aware of the world and the country that we weren't going to visit, knew, don't ask that kind of question, because there is a lot of hostility, with Scotland being a part of the UK.
Exactly.
And we're not even gonna go to.
Yeah, we're not
Ireland.
really going. Oh no, the thing is, the thing was to ask anybody, so it wasn't like it just happened to be a Scottish person. And again, them not being aware of race and nationality outside of
It hurts.
themselves.
Just telling.
So at the end, like I said, at the end of that day, I was asked to leave because I made them feel uncomfortable. They also asked the other brown person there to leave too.
Oh my god.
You think that was coincidence?
No. And they were okay with him because he was super. And the thing is, they were more okay with him. Like, I didn't find out till later. Apparently, it was at the end of the night where, like, go to your room, basically. But because he was super whitewashed, he did not know to speak any Spanish at all. So, these were Christian people. We had prayers and all that through the school. And that's how I was being treated still. Doing the same thing, if not less negative behavior, and still being treated like an outcast.
Yeah.
And like I said, like, I
It's
think
not
it,
only incredibly American, but it's also inherently British.
Alright, no. Like, I've seen a bunch of, like, the videos right now, even protests going on in the UK
John
too as well.
Boyega's leading
Oh,
the-
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that was a big one, yeah.
Which, how appropriate!
Yep.
Because, no.
and I guess that's one of the reasons why all these other countries are so willing to protest, because they see America as an example. If America can deal with if America has racism issues,
So does the rest of the world.
so does the rest of the world. But if America can fix it, they can at least be an example for all the other countries.
Fix it. I mean, that's the attempt right now.
Fix it.
But at the very least, like, all the world's eyes are on us. It's like the people explaining in the chat, that are outside the U.S. Clearly, the media is portraying all the protests and everything going on everywhere, around the country and everything in other countries. So I'm imagining, yeah, exactly. Like, that's it. Is they're seeing that the potential for reform is there.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
Actually,
we're at our hour and a half mark right now, since we came back. We can continue for half an hour more, or we can just end it here so we can go back to the multicam.
I
mean-
think we shouldn't, because we definitely have, like, I feel like everything else we talk about after this will be talked about tomorrow.
Yeah,
I agree. And then just
absolutely.
the fact that, like, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are probably interested to see what's going on too in the live feeds right now.
Especially at this hour. Normally, it is around this time where shit gets real.
Yeah. Last night, I was seeing last night too a lot of like the I think was it DC? I think
It
there
was
was like
DC.
a lot of
It was
it
DC.
got way more intense.
Yeah.
DC and Portland.
With the fireworks, the garbage, the trash
Yeah.
can set on fire.
Yeah.
There was that instance in Riverside where somebody tried to put one of those bottle fireworks in the middle of some protesters.
Yeah,
and
wait,
somebody
a
threw
little
it
bit more
back in the car.
context. A guy was in the car, got out, lit a
Oh.
firework,
Yep.
ran back inside
Right back
Right back into his car.
into his car, and some protester there.
Another
Right.
white dude. So which
Yeah.
is that's what's insane is like how it happened so
White
quick
on
that
white
I had to
violence.
watch the video a couple times. So the fact that someone was there, recognized this was happening, and had the foresight to not only like stop this bomb, but he threw it back into the car of the person who set it out. So I don't know what happened to the person who set it out, but
No, we saw it explode. Too.
yeah. But
So-
we don't know what happened.
It's
after
a
that.
bottle rocket.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know entirely how, like, depending on where you threw it in the car. If it was in the back
Yeah.
seat, it might be fine. If it was
No,
right
he
in his
did
lap.
not. He did not.
Yeah.
He did not throw that in the backseat of the car.
I do want to share a story of a friend of mine. I'm not sure if I shared it yesterday.
Not sure.
So he's a security guard. They're being called in right now to take care of the stores and all that. And he mentioned that it was the scariest night of his life, because meanwhile he was there, a group of people all wearing, fully covered, so we don't know if they're black or white or they're opportunists or whatever.
Yeah.
just saw a security guard coming, and they said, "Get him." They shot a firework, and it landed underneath his car, and he just saw it coming at him, and then he just heard the explosion, and he told me like he thought he was gonna die, like he thought that was gonna be his last thing, was being a security guard and being shot at indiscriminately. Like, and I think like these kind of stuff. And then I remember shortly after, he was very mad, and he got really mad at the rioters, the looters, and he was getting mad at the protests. And you know, because if it wasn't for the protests, there would have been no rioting, there would have been no looting. But at the same time, this was a neighborhood that's predominantly white, and I had to like remind them like that the protests are completely separate from
the rioters.
The rioters, the looters, the anarchists, and the people who just want to create problems. Mm-hmm. But I can understand why a lot of people are afraid.
Yeah.
And like this guy experienced something firsthand, and he didn't know who to blame.
Yeah.
And right now, and all the media was pushing a narrative to blame the protests. So like, I'm very thankful that nothing had happened to him. Apparently, it was a little red still when after the firework underneath his car when he went to go check, but he like ran. Like after it exploded, he was in shock and he left because he wasn't sure if the car was gonna explode. Like this is something that shouldn't have never happened. No.
And you don't look at someone and say get him.
Yeah.
Because that's antithetical to what exactly the protest stands for. You're not trying to kill cops. You are trying to reform the justice system.
Exactly.
And he you know, being a security guard tends to be the first step for a lot of people to become officers. So I wonder like if somebody has experienced this,
how does that shape their perspective?
How does that shape their perspective? Especially
I worry about that a lot because I have a few people too that are like in security and that I know, and they've been right now expressing their opinion very much like anti, looting. And there's a few that are kind of like go fall in between. They understand, but I know for a few of them, they definitely have that in mind of their future careers to be a cop, and it's just like I see where do you see the idea of protecting civilians, or where do you see your mindset shaped as to like who you frame as potential threats all the time, And if that happened to you and you were a cop, and let's just say you came upon the conclusion that it was a protester, what are you gonna think? What are you gonna believe for the rest of your life?
Where's at that point gonna be going at?
Now that you're not a security guard anymore, now you actually have more potential weapons and everything to actually it's really a scary thought, but it goes back to like so many different things to how that perspective is shaped for these people that are in the law, and that is why there needs to be reform. Yeah. So tomorrow we're gonna continue these conversations. We're gonna actually bring in somebody who was training to become an officer. I'm not sure if she went through the whole program. No, I think she did because she has a pension, right? Yeah. So we're gonna get an interesting perspective from an actual person who served. Yeah, exactly. So please tune in tomorrow. We might have a couple other callers call in as well. And we're gonna be talking about things like the Stanford prison experiments. We're gonna be talking a bit more about the systemic racism and how is it that we got here. And I will have a lot more information on the prison system tomorrow. I'm excited. Yeah, especially the for-profit prison system. Oh, you don't want to go into that. But we're going to. Look, people need to put it this way: if we start getting more of an audience here, they got to be educated and understand how this, these things came to be. So, yeah, tomorrow, see that, and then as always, we're gonna keep live streaming all of the protests and everything going on, showing what it is that people are truly like out there right now, fighting for essentially. Yeah, in lifetime too. Like I'm still shocked that we can actually do this now. Like it's exactly. I love it. Yeah. So I love in the sense of the technology we have here. So let's come follow the Hub on Instagram, Twitter, at the Hub Podcast. And follow Twitch stream as always. Yeah, and follow us on Twitch.
if you see her amazing mask, feel free to message us, DM us, see if you can get your hands on one of these, because we're actually selling these to support the Black Lives Matter movement. We're actually deciding
proceeds charities will go towards those.
We're actually right now we're in the process of vetting where it is that the money is going to make sure that whatever money comes in goes to the right places and actually goes into the hands of people that need it the most.
And we will have those tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I hope you guys have a good night, and let's go watch these live streams now.
Yeah.